After a long couple of weeks, the Book of Boba Fett finale is finally here, but did it live up to the hype? Find out in our Star Wars Lad spoiler review. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Book of Boba Fett reviews. It is Chapter 7, the finale, in the name of honor. This will be a spoiler-filled review of Chapter 7 of the Book of Boba Fett. So if you have not seen the episode, do not watch our review. Go watch the episode of the Book of Boba Fett first, and then come back here and listen to our thoughts. We'll be diving into all of the major plot points from this episode and really the season as a whole, talking about all our favorite things, our least favorite things, and giving a score for our season 1 review of the Book of Boba Fett at the end here. So we're going to dive in, but before we do so, please hit that like button down below, subscribe to the channel for Star Wars content minimum 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. This week we will be having our comic reviews as well on Thursday, and a conversation about whether there will be a season 2 of the Book of Boba Fett on Friday, in place of predictions and speculations. If you haven't checked out Monday's video, Karam's favorite tunes, original trilogy edition. Check that one out about the diegetic music in Star Wars. So now to get into the Book of Boba Fett, Chapter 7. This was definitely an improvement as we get back into Boba Fett's story. So we're back with Boba Fett as the main character this time. The Mandalorian, yes, still is quite involved, but in a capacity I think that we all thought he was going to be involved in prior to the show coming out. So we're on Tatooine finally in Mos Espa, getting everything's going down in this episode, and we get some twists and turns. We get a lot of action, which was I thought the action was super well staged in almost every sequence. There are some incredible shots in this this episode, particularly when Boba and Mando fly out and ambush the Pykes. That was just, that was so cool. That's a Star Wars toy, dream, as Robert Rodriguez has always talked about when he staged chapter 6 of The Mandalorian season 2. He's was in his backyard with his sons playing with Star Wars toys, imagining how he was going to frame Boba Fett. That looked like a Star Wars toy. You got two Mandalorians right next to each other firing. Oh, and Boba Fett was, he finally came to play in this episode. He used all his gadgets, everything he's got, his missiles, his knee rockets, his jetpack rocket. Everything. He finally flies too, which we've been waiting to see all season. So I think we should start a discussion there, just in terms of the action and the battle in this episode, and how it finally lived up to what we were kind of expecting from Boba that we got in Mandalorian season 2. We got the Boba that really kicks ass in this episode, and he finally gets back to the ways we saw him in Mandalorian season 2. So what were your thoughts initially on seeing that first fight scene, especially with Boba and Mando teaming up? Was it what you were hoping for when this episode started?
Yeah, I would say the action was almost exactly what I expected. I know some people are online already saying, "Oh, it looks a little cheap, this and that," but I think you have to also make considerations for the location that it's being shot in. It's a dusty town with not much to that is there, right? Like there's not really much to it. Like it is hard, it is rough, and that's like the nicer part of it because once you go out into the desert and more of these outskirt towns, it's worse. It's not a fun place to be in. So I thought the action was great. I think a little some of it went a little expected in action wise. Like I knew I was like, okay, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen. But there were things that I really liked. I liked how what took me by surprise was there was already a Cad Bane set up to he wanted to dictate the terms of the fight immediately and try to get Boba to start. And I liked how Boba's crew around him were like, nope. It's mostly Fennec, but think about it, set things on your own terms and do that. And then eventually, yes, we do get that fight. And I thought that fight was sick. And I thought this fight with Cad Bane and Boba actually understood, even if it wasn't fully developed in the show, it actually understood the changes in Boba and his character and his fighting style and all that. The fact that he goes with his gaffy stick in the end instead of his weapons, at the end, that is who he became. That's what's differentiated him from the Boba that Cad Bane was able to shoot faster before whenever they had their last duel and all that. I thought that action was great. Like you said, before we even started this, the Boba Fett action with Mando, with Din Djarin just flying around the jetpacks and all that. That was sick. Like the ambush of the Pykes, crazy. Like I think the one thing I really enjoyed about this episode is that Tamora Morrison finally got to show off how fit he is, right? Like when he's like walking around and all that, it's like I don't know. There's some things about like his armor that are definitely like not as premium as Mando's because Mando's just straight up got like someone when you compare like a 60s sports car to like an 80s sports car, right? That there's already a huge gap. An 80s to 2000s, another huge gap, right? It's kind of like that where what Boba Fett looked like back in the day was super cool, and he still would look cool in that same armor. This one just feels like a tweak of that because it's more blacks, taking away like the crotch guard, some other like baggier elements that he would have used in his bounty hunting days. It's definitely like a simplification that's for comfort, for mobility, for his story purposes that I got. But like when we were seeing him in the very beginning of the season, I was like, it's better. He looks slimmer than he did in Mando for sure, because it's not like he's trying to shove it all together or hold it by like glue on the super glue on the edges. Like it felt like he had a jumpsuit, everything was great. But this fight, you could really see him when he was standing next to Mando. I'm like, no, this dude is like in tip top fighting shape. Like he is killing it. He's jumping on this Rancor and he's shooting off of the Rancor, which is great because I was scared that they might just do like only Rancor fighting and no like Boba using his weapons on top of that. I thought that was really cool. Um, I think some of the action with like the Freetown people and the Mod Squad and all that was a little bit simpler, and I think that is where I have some issues with just Rodriguez directing in general. He leans too much into the B movie aesthetic at times, and I think when it came to like the group fighting, it was a little oversimplified. Like you're saying, toys, like yeah, that's great for like when you're doing setup and you're kind of how do I say it? Like, what's the word I'm looking for when you're kind of like laying out the
Storyboard.
yeah, like
Diorama.
yeah, dioramas, but like more than that, like location, like physically, like when you're setting up people in on a place. Like I felt like he got that part down. It was just like once the action started, like what do you do with these people? They're all running the same way, right? And they're all kind of just jogging off. I'm like, there should be a little bit more variety of like people sprinting doing this. There's some moments like where there's one of the mod guy with the eye, like him and the girl are holding up chrysanthemum, and then a Pike shows up out of nowhere, and then this dude, who's also injured by the way because he's thrown off his bike, suddenly does like this flourish with his cape and spins around and then shoots like unnecessarily, like how Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan do their stupid spins in a fight. It was like that, and I was just like some of the action there. I'm just like, come on, that could be a bit more serious, a bit more creative. But the big stuff that had to be good was great. And Boba, perfect. His individual fights, his group fights, his jetpack fights, all that was prime stuff.
Yeah, they really killed it with the Boba Fett action. I think that's the biggest takeaway for me in what I liked with this episode, and the reason why this episode is, if not my favorite, amongst my favorites of the Boba Fett centric episodes of the show. I think the Mandalorian episodes are still by far the best made episodes of the show, even if they aren't necessarily Book of Boba Fett episodes. But this one was close to being my favorite, if not my favorite, of the Boba Fett centric stuff because we finally felt like we got Boba Fett. And I think that's going to be a common theme throughout our discussion of the season. And for me, it personally is as you start to see more and more scenes of this and you just go, man, like there's so many missed opportunities here to do this here or that there that could have set this part up perfectly. And why did we have to do this with the mod gang? Like what's there? Why are they here? And like you were saying, there are so many things that there's so many like we talked about. I wanted the hero shot of of Mando and Boba with all the bounty hunters. I wanted to see all that. We got a lot of hero shots of this. They were just of like random people, the mod bikers, the Freetown people. There's like we're giving moments to people here that really don't need moments. I think in that sense, it does come across as a little cheesy when you're trying to prop up characters that really no one cares about. Let's be honest, nobody really cares about these people. They're kind of cannon fodder. But Chrysanthemum, I thought I liked what they did with Chrysanthemum here. Again, the stuff Chrysanthemum does in episode 4 of Boba Fett, I think, was the best. His little fight with Trandoshan in Madame Garza's bar. That was Chrysanthemum I was looking forward to. That was the Chrysanthemum from the comics. I don't know if Robert Rodriguez quite captured the ferocity of Chrysanthemum, especially in chapter 3. For someone who's as good at directing action as Robert Rodriguez is, it seems like the hand-to-hand combat stuff is a little off for me, especially with Chrysanthemum in the bit. He just makes him seem a little too lumbering and too hulkish. He doesn't move fast. He's not he When he got overwhelmed by the Trandoshans in this episode, I was kind of like,
Right,
really? Like
yeah.
the stuff when he's got his like electric gauntlets on, like he's just really slow compared to how he is in that bar fight. And this time he has something to actually fight for. He's like fighting for his life versus that he's just ambushing random guys. I wanted more there and stuff like that. I do agree. The structure of this episode is super formulaic. It is every twist and turn you can see coming from a mile away, whether it's the Rancor appearance or somebody, them people being pinned down and then Finnick saves them. Stuff like that is very predictable. But I think why I really liked this episode for the most part was just we finally got that Boba Fett action that we associate with the character. You know, we don't associate much with Boba Fett from the films. He's just a stoic badass who stands in the corner and captures Han Solo, right? So we have this made up backstory in our heads for what we see in terms of Boba Fett visual language because we haven't gotten much of it over the years. And then Mandalorian kind
Yeah.
of stepped it up. But this was kind of okay, we finally get to see Boba do those things that we've seen in the original trilogy and Mando, but to a higher extent. We get to see him do all this stuff that he's storied for. And for me, that was finally kind of what I wanted. And it does make me again disappointed a little bit that we didn't get it sprinkled throughout. It is cool to have one major set piece as we do in this episode, and where we get to see him pull out all his tricks. But it would have been nice to at least see him like fly around and shoot somebody once in a while in the first 6 episodes. So like that, this episode is just a ton of back and forth for me. It's like I love this part, but it also makes me wish we got something else in a different part of the season. So and I think that's really my thoughts on the season 1 in general with when it comes to the structure of what this episode did with the fight scene. But yeah, let's talk about the Rancor as well too, because you started to touch on it, and that scene was awesome. I loved it. I loved
Yeah.
what they did with the Rancor. Everybody thinks of the Rancor, I feel like, as a really slow, lumbering beast because of what you see in Return of the Jedi. If you play Force Unleashed or do anything really outside of Return of the Jedi with Rancors, they're like King Kong like this, and we got our King Kong shot of him climbing the tower. I thought that was a little on the nose, but this was a really great fight, and I thought the like Droideka 2.0 that we got, like I don't know what the official name for those will be. They really felt like just like mechanized droidicas like they were just gigantic droidicas, which was cool. But yeah, I thought that fight was really cool, definitely reminiscent of something from like Godzilla or King Kong. But what were your thoughts on how they used the Rancor and how we finally got to see that unfold after like teasing it for so long?
I almost wish that we could have gotten a little machete cameo once more. Just be like, boss, I got him ready. Like he's all yours, right? But I obviously you have to like even if we know it's coming, you kind of can't like even hint at it. Boba's just gotta be like, I'm gonna get reinforcements. Like what? Where? We don't have any more. And he's like, doesn't have to say anything. And yeah, I mean, the Rancor fight stuff was sick because the thing is, I didn't really expect like these big, like, I don't know, they almost reminded me of like the old Republic droids, like the ones that kind of have like those little, it's like the eye and then like the head. It was weird. It was like I was expecting a lot more like Pike versus human conflict, and then I think it kind of struck me that I realized like as the Pike design is just so hard to do in live action that how much action can you really do up close with them like hand to hand and all that. So I can see why like they had to like add in those big droids, and those big droids I think were pretty good. I think they raised the stakes because it was like okay, well they're not gonna like shoot and come from all these different vantages. They're not gonna be so hidden, but they're gonna be big and they're gonna be lumbering, and people are gonna try to do what they can. Like we saw Chrysanthemum try to like he almost did break through the shields with his electric gauntlets, which I thought was a pretty nice touch there. But obviously injured. Plus, they're like, okay, shield is being disabled, must whack and hit the person doing. Like the droids are gonna be smart enough to do that.
Yeah, they're a lot more self-aware than droidicas are.
Yeah, yeah. Droidicas are kind of just dumb. Like they're just spinning, and then they're like, yeah, I don't know. They just, but the yeah, like you said, the Rancor fight was sick. I don't know. It just I think it's just hard to believe a lot of things that have happened in this series. Like a lot these last two episodes, so much of like the dark saber and Luke and Ahsoka, and just seeing the beginning of his Jedi temple and all these different things. And then to see something like the Rancor, which was like set up like so long ago, I almost forgot it was happening. And then when it happened, I was like, this is crazy. Like this is a fully realized Rancor. And now it's like when I watch episode 6, I don't even think of the Rancor this like slow lumbering creature. Now I have to consider like it's just because it's like stuck in a low ceiling sort of situation where it's like its prey is not going to get anywhere. It's kind of playing with its food more than anything. Like that adds like an interesting twist to me. I honestly thought when he had the yeah, I don't love the King Kong moment, but I thought when that played out, Boba would come down and kind of like just like how he treats his bantha, be like, "Ah, it's okay, girl. Like, oh, it's all good." I thought he'd do something like that. I'm very glad that Mando, like, tried to ride it and failed because it very much continues with his, like, he only can ride a blurg, and he was kinda bad at that too, so I like that he tried, but he's again, there's, like, a distinction between what he's good at, what Boba's good at,
Yeah, I
and
was worried
yeah,
about that because
yeah,
when he flew up there, I was like, come on, man, are we really going to make Mando be able to do everything Boba could do,
yeah.
especially in his own show?
Yeah, no, and that's the thing, like, there's, like, a level of, like, they know what they're doing, and, like, there's so many elements of this that I think were great. I just think a lot of it pieced together, like, the action, like, the stuff that kinda happens, the gray stuff, and that could have been more, like, open to, like, a more creative director, someone who's more used to, like, shooting, like, a war film or something like that, would be more adept at, like, using their landscape, even if it is all, like, volume screens and mixed in with, like, some limited locations that have to be reused and whatnot. I think they would have been able to like piece together a little bit more kinetic stuff into it instead of just like, oh, we're jogging away, oh, we're pinned down, oh, we're behind this truck, right? Because when we see the Rancor stuff, when we see Boba and Mando, that stuff was great. Somehow the scene with Pelly and like the little robo carrier and how like Mando's holding on and like that whole sort of fight scene had more action sometimes than like the scenes that had a lot of the people. And I'm not going to complain too much. I think it's very easy for people to complain about all these things after we just got so much cool Star Wars content in Book of Boba Fett. But as far as like the Rancor stuff specifically, knocked it out of the park. As far as Boba Fett himself versus Cad Bane, knocked it out of the park. Boba and Mando together, knocked it out of the park. Some cool action shots of just so many different things, knocked it out of the park. And I just to add to that, I love Fennec was just ruthless. Like it was like a joke in the first episode where she like kind of is like, I only need one, so she kills that guy from the red whatever. Here she just like straight up like kills the rest of the most Espa like heads. She kills Mokshai's with like I thought it was Boba at first. I was like, oh my god, it's like is he using the cable now? But no, she like just straight up lifts up Mokshai's around his head and snaps his neck, and then she just stabs the Pike remaining leader. And I'm like, that's the thing. Like there's it was a great show episode for pure action, but this is something I felt like could have used a little bit more depth. Like it for me, it did everything I wanted, and the length was good, the action was great. But there are things that after seeing these last two episodes, I'm like, and seeing Mando season 1 and 2, I'm like, I know where they could do better. This is very clearly a Mando 2.5.
And that'll feed into something I want to talk about too. Is like I haven't touched on Cad Bane yet either, and this show, just the structure is really strange. It is like going back now and looking 3 weeks ago when we were still getting flashbacks. It's strange that flashbacks were even part of the show as like a permanent piece of the first 4 episodes, like a significant portion, and not just in let's tell Boba's backstory, but like the show was styled through flashbacks. Like that was there was they were trying to juxtapose paralleling stories with flashbacks, which just seems so strange now 3 episodes later where we didn't get any flashbacks. And to top all of that off, it didn't, like, we still have never fleshed out what's going on with the main storyline. Like the modern day stuff felt so just given so much less care than the flashbacks were. And to me, that's where the show really falters, because I mean we could have had at least 3 or 4 more episodes before this big finale, and I agree. Like, this isn't a completely action filled finale. It doesn't really wrap up too many character beats. It wraps up a long standing one we have between Boba Fett and Cad Bane, but for 99% of the audience, no one's gonna know like why this is important.
Right.
Nobody's only people who watch the Clone Wars, and then not even just the Clone Wars, but on top of that, the cut episodes of the Clone Wars.
The unfinished reels of
Yeah,
the show.
unfinished
Yeah.
season 7 reels of Clone Wars. Barely anybody's going to have seen that. So when most of the stuff that's talked about between Cad Bane and Boba Fett is brought back up, people like us were like, awesome, like this is great. And I personally thought the Cad Bane death, the fight, all of that, the confrontation between the two, phenomenal. But I do feel cheated because I wanted more Cad Bane, and I'm bummed to have seen him die in this episode when he just shows up for like 5 minutes in the last episode, and then that's it. Now he's the big bad of the whole season. Like, where's he been? Where's that? Like, there's so much there in
Yeah.
one scene between Cad Bane and Boba Fett that we could have done an entire season of story on about. Is Boba Fett still a murderer? How is his past catching up with him? Who is this guy that used to train him? There's so many things there that not just in this, but you could have done in a Western style, in a samurai style, in even like a mafioso style of like an old Don coming up against a new Don. We've seen these tropes done in so many things. And to me, it's just like, man, I see these scenes and I go, that was so perfectly executed, but where was the rest of it? Like I didn't, I
Yeah.
wanted so much more.
Yeah.
And so like I'm really torn with that part, especially because I'm like, it's not that Cad Bane died that I'm upset about, and it's not how he died, because I do love that he beat Boba to the draw. I was really worried there when he was standing over Boba that we're gonna have Finnick come in and shoot him or something. I was like, oh my god, if that
Yeah.
happens. And so I think it all played out perfectly. But then like we also had no end to it. We had no wrap up. Like Cad Bane's last lines are, "I always knew you were a killer," and then he dies, and like we never see. Okay, so what's happening with Boba now? Like Boba proved that he is a killer. So like, are we going to get resolution with that? Is that going to be a season 2 plot point if there is a season 2? Like, where it's just like another idea tossed out there to me that like I really just I wanted to explore the character of Boba Fett in this show, and I don't feel like we did to the full extent that we could have.
Right.
Especially the
Right.
flashbacks to me, like I did not need to know what he did over the last 5 years, and it's great that he had a Tuscan family and all that, but that never came back up either. And we're
And
we're
it's
waiting.
not paced well. It's not
No,
paced well at the end because we start off with the first episode with Robert Rodriguez. He gives us a Return of the Jedi escape. Great. Some people were already saying, "Oh man, I needed more. He should have done something crazy and flown out." Like whatever. He's out. He's out. We got it. We got a body double. It switched over to seeing him like change and whatever. That's great. There's some thought behind that. And then we see like a little bit of time with a kid, and then he proves himself to the his owners of shorts, the Tuscans who are controlling him, and that's how the episode ends. You're like, okay, solid, solid. Episode two is great because you see like so much of like fighting against the Nikto gangs, against the people in the train, and like you see him like rise up and learn and all these. Again, that whole episode still to me is probably top three of this season, and it's very up there because the thing is, it hit every beat it wanted to. Even if it was very tropey, it did it really well. Sometimes a trope is just that good. And then you're like, wow, okay, he's really like earned his stripes. He's done his gaffy stick. Wow, that's awesome. And like Now maybe in this next episode we see like the rise and the fall that happens in half of the episode, and then the other half we start to kind of contrast that with what he's trying to do now with his palace life with Mos Espa, right? And compare how like it's because of his failures there, right? That's why but no, we get like a 5 minute scene of like that's supposed to take place supposedly 3 or 4 years ahead of time without any like rise or montage or anything. And then we just get mostly like mod squad bike stuff, and it's not great. He does some planning, sure, but it's not great. And I think that's where my biggest problem with the show is that Robert Rodriguez was the showrunner. I think in terms of his action, fine, I can live with it. But I think he leans too much into his B movie tropes, and he first 2 episodes he did, he cut that way too close to the bone. Like that third episode was only 38 minutes. If you're gonna do what he does, I would have had another 10 minutes just to flesh out his flashbacks, and maybe 3 or 4 minutes just to add into if we're gonna keep the exact same structure to episode three. Because then that way I feel like, all right, at least there's something done with Boba in present day and all this and that. And 5 and 6, I know it's Favreau and Filoni are part of the writing team, and, there's not too much Rodriguez does there, but you gotta pad Boba in there a little bit. As great as those episodes are, we don't see Boba at all in 5, and in 6, he's there for one scene, gives a head nod, and that's it. And there's so much that this finale had to do. Like I was saying last week, it had to do this, this, and this. And it did about like 80% of the exact beats that it needed. And this was probably the best directed Robert Rodriguez Star Wars thing I've seen. Only issue is it's not as good as something as like the guy Kevin who did, episode 4 of the Book of Boba Fett, which I thought was phenomenal, right? And we saw Black Chrysanthemum in the Sanctuary just rip off Trandoshan arms. He's like you said, he feels different there than he does in these Robert Rodriguez directed episodes. I don't know, he leans so much into his own catalog of work and stylization that paired with the faults in this writing, in the pacing of the season, in the structure of the season, it made these 3 episodes that kind of directed like episodes I almost dreaded, and I don't really dread Star Wars, and ultimately, I didn't like walk away from any episode being like, ugh. Like 3 was where I got close, but every episode I was like, that was good. Oh, that's really great. Oh my god, my mind is blown. Like last week, this episode, I'm like, yeah, that was really strong, but it's not everything I wanted. Like if especially with how Cad Bane, like you said, he comes in if you know what's happened in the Clone Wars, you're like, man, this is a dude I've seen since 2009. Like, that's crazy. Like, it's so sick. Like, oh man, I saw those unfinished reels like after Boba's trained on Tatooine with him. Like, that's crazy. Like, that makes so much sense why Boba's like even more inclined to like respect the Tuscans and all this and that. But again, there's so many fans who don't even watch the Star Wars movies. They have only seen The Mandalorian, and they're coming into this and they're just like, "What happened? Who is this guy? Just a blue dude who killed Cobb Vanth." And sure, like I said, I enjoy that Boba killed him. I predicted that at first, and I was like, maybe he shoots his, like you said, maybe he shoots the gun out of the hand. But I was like, I don't know. I feel like just because of how everything's been structured so far, Boba has to kill someone just to like showcase that he's still not like this goody two shoes like Din Djarin is, right? Like he is very much like a killer who has justice on his mind, but he is still a killer. But like, what does that last line mean? You've always been a killer. I mean, like that doesn't mean anything to someone who hasn't watched all this stuff. And even someone who has watched all this stuff, you're not expecting them to see unfinished reels. And then on top of that, is he really the big bad? Like, he's not. He just feels like another part of the Pikes, another part of the most Espa heads that had one meeting of sorts, right? And there wasn't like I know some people I was saying Crimson Dawn, like, maybe we see like a little hint there or something like that. And we didn't. And it felt like the Pikes were never always the bigger ones. If there was like a hint in like the after credit scene of like a Pike agent going back, oh, we can't go to Tatooine and Boba Fett. And it's like, and you just see like someone with a Crimson Dawn jacket or something be like, awaken the dawn. Like we are ready for taking things further after you guys failed. Like I would have been like, okay, that's good. Like Boba has gotten some development. He's gotten some layers on this, but We don't even get like the idea that the Pikes are so intimidating because, again, like you said, flashbacks are just so much more better than the present day because they take so much more time. And then Robert Rodriguez kind of butchers the ending of some of the most interesting parts about Boba in his time with the Tuscans and makes it into like a quick like, oh, he's gone and then they're dead. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like when it comes to story, it's really not my favorite. Like we discuss on this channel the Bounty Hunters comics. This very much felt like the Bounty Hunters comics, but as a TV show. There's so much cool stuff going on. It's the Fast and Furious of Star Wars. I'm gonna like it. I'm not gonna really complain about it. There were so many cool things that elevated it above what it would have just been without, Luke and Ahsoka and Grogu and all that. The action's great when it can be and when it had to be, but is this really I liked what they did, but I was expecting a lot more.
We'll finish off here with the tease at the end of Grogu and Mando and sitting in the Naboo starfighter droid pod as we all kind of predicted. But yeah, I mean, I completely agree with almost everything you said. I do, me personally, I don't have as much a problem with the way the episodes are structured as much as the writing behind the whole season. Like it just doesn't feel cohesive. It it feels like with Mandalorian, each episode is a standalone adventure. It's an episodic show in most cases where it has an overarching narrative, but we maintain mostly until about the season finale to the second to last episode. We maintain mostly new adventures every single week as we go through and find our overall story. And that's how season 1 and season 2 were structured. With Boba Fett, it almost felt like Clone Wars in some cases, where it's like, okay, these 2 episodes kind of have a little arc, but then these 2 episodes kind of have a different arc, and then but overall we do still have a narrative, but we're not going to really touch on that narrative at all. And there's just so many things that I can come up with personally in my head from from a large variety of angles to make the modern day stuff far more interesting. I thought the Hut angle was far more interesting than the Pykes. If Huts would have been the villain, I think that would have worked so much better. But they kind of just show up to be like, okay, here's some Hut imagery for this type of show, and then they're gone. And it's like, there's so many pieces that are added, then subtracted, then added, subtracted, and it never really adds up to a whole. Even in episode 2, the Pykes don't feel like they are the villain of the show. They're just a villain for that episode. And then it's like, oh wait, so they are the villain of this show? And then it also felt like, well, they're being set up to be the villain of the show because of the history that I mean, this episode kind of treats it like it's a big reveal that the Pykes killed the Tuscans. I think we all thought that from that episode. And if at least they didn't kill them, they hired the Niktos to kill them. So even if you thought the Niktos killed them, it was like they were definitely directly involved with their deaths. So to me, that wasn't that big of a reveal. So then we were setting them up, but then we have no connection really with the Tuscans, which were at the beginning of the show and so important for the first 3 episodes, but then just disappear in the last 4. And we don't even, yeah, and I agree that the way the Tuscan death scene is staged, we see the chief, but we don't see the female Tuscan, who's arguably given more screen time than the chief. She's the Tuscan with the most screen time in the whole series,
We don't
and we
even
don't
see
even
the
see her
kid.
dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't see like so I feel like that's not absurd for us as fans, or even just passive watchers of the show, to be like, okay, so where are these other ones? So now we have to get all the way to the end of the show to be like, no, they're actually all dead and we never saw it. It's like, where did that come from? This is a lot of complaining, and I don't want to just be another YouTube video that complains, because that Rancor stuff, that's Game of Thrones level special effects quality television. I mean, you're not going to really see that anywhere. That is so high quality. That's Star Wars film quality level special effects. There is a ton of money, effort, time, and passion put into this show that's really exceptional, and there's a lot of really great things about it. But without a season 2, unfortunately, it feels rushed in a lot of ways. The storytelling, not the production. It feels weird that it was written by one person. Like, it feels like it's written by a team of 20 people who were like,
Yeah.
this is what I want to see Boba do, and this is what I want to see Boba do. And it's like, he doesn't really do any of them to the fullest extent that he could. To me, the Cat Bane stuff, it was, and the Cad Bane, the mask that they made for him. Oh my god, it's incredible. It's so good. And I thought it was even better in this episode. Some of those close-ups are so good. I mean, I feel like I am.
His mouth felt way better this time. Like, I thought it was, like, a little
Oh
buck tooth
man.
at times, but this time he got a little bit of the sneer that he has in the Clone
Yeah.
Wars. I was just
Yeah.
like, "Oh, yeah."
There was
Yeah.
like his bones, his cheekbones really tightened up in this one on a lot of the close-ups. I felt like it was so good. It was so perfect. I have my Cad Bane guy that's been in the background. I don't know if you guys have seen that right here, and I'm just like, his face looked like this so many times
Yeah.
in the show. Like it was amazing. There's so many things that are jaw-dropping in this show, and so there's definitely a lot of positives, but just the storytelling in general, it was not cohesive enough, and there were too many ideas and not enough resolutions, not enough things that were really padded out. And I want to see, we're going to talk about season 2 for on Friday's video, so you guys are going to want to check that out if there is a season 2. But I really really want to see it because there's so many things that need to breathe. There's so many things that can exist in this. And yeah, I think the Pykes, if the Pykes were revealed to have worked for the Hutts or Crimson Dawn or somebody bigger, I think that would have alleviated a lot of the underwhelming sense of them. And the fact that they don't exist in 2 of the episodes as well is like crazy too. It's like not just Boba that's not there. It's a whole, like, basically all the elements of the show, and finishing up the show too. The Mando stuff does not need to be in this show, unfortunately. Like, there's no reason it needs to be in this show at all. He can show
Yeah.
up and just be there doing stuff with the Darksaber, and we never needed to have seen any of this other stuff. I'm glad we did. Again, it's to my 2 favorite episodes of the show, but it did not need to be in this show. It really
And
didn't.
it doesn't need to be in it, but you don't even have to make it that long. You really
Yeah,
don't. You just have to, like, chop everything off by, like, 10, 15 minutes, give that to Boba, especially focus on the present day stuff, and I would've been like, "Okay, I know a lot more what's going on." Like, here, I'm like, "Cool, the Pikes are the villains." Like, I have to accept that more than I have to believe that, right? And look, I'm not I know you and I seem like we're complaining a lot. We're not complaining about a show that we think it's pretty good, but we've seen better. We've seen some extremely old time Star Wars things in this show, which shows that was like, hey, you can do a lot of things. But we've also seen some choices that were like, was it necessary? Like you're saying, this didn't even necessary other than this one episode. He shouldn't have been such a huge player, but because of like the nature of these shows and who's watching them, maybe you kind of have to put a little bit more emphasis there. This was always talked about as a Mando 2.5. I mean, like, what are your thoughts on just Grogu showing up and having the chainmail? He's clearly made the
yeah.
decision of going with Din.
Personally, I was disappointed. I feel like it's a weak choice, in all honesty. It's undermines a lot of what season two's finale means. And to just, I mean, when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, too, The Mandalorian is probably going to be a lot more viewed than the Book of Boba Fett. And the fact that there's 0 episodes of The Mandalorian that exist without Grogu is very disappointing to me, I think, because I thought it was a really strong creative choice to have him go with Luke, not just for the Star Wars story in the grand galaxy, but purely because it was like, okay, this guy is like kind of the thing that's been selling your show, and you're going to get rid of him. And we all knew he was coming back, but like, is he coming back at the end of the season? What's going to prompt him coming back? And again, even as great as last week's episode was, I want more stuff with Grogu and Luke. I want more reason why he wants to go back with Mando. I want more explanation to all of that. And so, in a sense, that this choice was just done so abruptly. And it's great when R2 flies him in. I'm like, at first you're like, oh, Luke's here. And then it's like, oh no, R2 flew Grogu in. Um, it's all great visually. There's some great Grogu moments in this episode, and I'm excited to see Grogu and Mando back together. But again, I wanted Mando to explore his own identity. I wanted season 3 of Mandalorian to be heavy, heavy on the Mandalorian culture and Mandalorian history. Really set us up for that finale where we're gonna have Bo-Katan and all the Mandalorian stuff going on with the Darksaber, all the politics of what's going on currently with the Mandalorians and all the different coverts across the galaxy. I just wanted to see season 3 all about that, without, and it probably still will be, just Grogu will be there, but I wanted Grogu to be kind of this reason he's trying to better the galaxy, while the Jedi are off here, and then maybe when the two collide, there's a reunion and there's a nice piece to it. I figured Grogu was coming back in season 3. I just was hoping it wasn't in the first episode. But yeah, what were your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, I think it is a weak choice. I don't really mind it. I liked his moments in this episode, especially how he like puts the Rancor to sleep. I was like, okay, it's like he's actually learned something. He's done some cool things. But I don't know. People are gonna be like, oh man, corporate has meddled, Disney meddled with Favreau and Filoni, but I don't think so. I think this was really something they wrote. I mean, the storyboards have been done 2 years in advance. Like this was a decision they were committed to for a while now. Um, I personally thought I would see Grogu reunite at the third episode or fourth episode of Mando. I thought it was still going to be a first half season just to draw in people who had like maybe fallen off and be like, oh no, Grogu's back. Like they've been like, oh yeah, sick. Um, there's definitely gonna be that shot of him with the sublight thruster shot on, and he's like, "Woo!" and like the lights go by. I think that's I'm definitely gonna use that GIF like so much. That's a good meme. But I don't. If he was an after credit scene, I would have been even more pleased. But he's like an active player at this point in the story, which if I had a clue on how this timeline was in Book of Boba Fett, maybe I would have been better. But like, if like I knew this was like, oh, this has been like 9 months to a year after Mando season 2 ended, I would have been like, okay, I can live with that. But it's like me doing these head canons and fitting in different things to just justify it, and I don't think I can really justify a very safe decision to bring back your moneymaker. I get why, but I don't think there's anything wrong about like letting Din just work through these struggles, look through Boba for an example, maybe spend his time maybe with Bo-Katan specifically or someone else. Like that dude looks cool enough himself. You don't need like a gimmick of like a "Badoo" or like a smiling face the whole time. Like Din Djarin was cool in episode 2 of the first season of Mandalorian for me because he was down and dirty. He was doing everything he could. Like he was a fighter. He was, he has this creed to him. Everything about him is cool, and he gets hurt all the time. Right? In a way, the mistake for me was that they gave his armor so quickly in the show to the fullest extent that like it naturally made the focus a little bit more on Grogu because he's vulnerable to the degree. He's a baby. He's a kid. If he was a man who by the midpoint of season 2 had this full armor, I think I would have been like, "Oh man, like now I really want to see how he's growing." But the, he didn't grow himself as a character because he's always been the caretaker. He's always been the father. And I'm not saying there hasn't been great work done with him. There has been, but they went through so much of his stuff already that I think in their mind they're like, "Oh, we've already developed Din. Like we're gonna get these two together, and then we're gonna do all this Mandalorian stuff, and hopefully stuff with Bad Batch and season 2, and stuff that we might be premiering at Celebration. All that will get people like more ready for this whole Mandalorian conflict in season 3. That's inevitable, but like, is it necessary to not hold off for Grogu for at least until next or this December? Like, I don't see any reason for him to be in here. Again, he was used well. He was used well when he was used. Din was used well in this episode. The action with the Rancor and Boba insane, used well. But story and direction are the things that I felt were very much just average and very safe and very conventional. But overall, I still enjoyed it. Quite a good deal.
Yeah, that's the whole tough thing about this show, man. It's all good. It's all good, but is it what needs to be done? I don't know. And I think the Grogu stuff really just felt out of place in this series as a whole, and why is that plot point being wrapped up here in this show that has no pretext for that story at all? Like it just pops up randomly and then it's resolved randomly. It's like one of the major hanging plot threads of the Mandalorian is wrapped up in 2 episodes in the Book of Boba Fett show. It's kind of indicative of the whole storytelling. So we've been talking for a while. I'm going to pass it to you. What's your final quick thoughts on season 1 of the Book of Boba Fett as a whole, and your score for the season out of 5?
I think it's like a very good show. Like it's not something that's gonna win big awards or anything. It's not the flashiest. It's not the brightest. It's not even Boba Fett's show for 2 whole episodes. Really strange choices with structure between the flashback and present day. That wasn't the way when we were looking at it at the start. Like, okay, we're going from a lot more flashbacks to present day. It'll totally shrink over and then kind of flip. That didn't really happen because by the time it could have flipped, right, not only did we get like a weird Robert Rodriguez episode and then a sort of a setup episode, then after that was just straight up like, oh, okay, we're doing this thing with Mando and oh, okay, Luke, Ahsoka, and that's the kind of some insane Star Wars content. I will always appreciate the Book of Boba Fett for that. I will appreciate Book of Boba Fett for a good finale. I will appreciate Book of Boba Fett for a very strong episode 2 and to show us how we got to start. Like, appreciate what it does for the lore. I think this is a show even more than Mando season 1 and 2 that felt really cool for me in terms of lore. I think only the end of Mando season 2 really compares to this in terms of like, oh wow, this totally changes things, how it's what's going on at this time period. Like everything about what changed with Boba Fett, what's going on with the politics, even if it's not fully discussed on Mos Espa and Tatooine. That's cool. All the stuff with the Rancor, with the Pykes, all that stuff was cool, but it was very surface level and scattered and unfocused and not interesting when you realize that the 2 best episodes of the show by far are the Mandalorian episodes. So yeah, very up and down season. Not one that I didn't mind though. I really had a lot of fun. I'll give this like, yeah, 3.5 out of 5. It sits there comfortably for me.
Okay, a lot of similar thoughts. This show is very, very messy um, in its structure. Pretty much liked almost every episode of the show. There was only a couple I wasn't a fan of in general, but I liked at least all the episodes. Unfortunately, my 2 favorite episodes have nothing to do with Boba Fett, so I do like, even though I love those episodes, when I'm grading, I'm gonna knock it down for those episodes being my favorite. I liked a lot of things they brought in, some all-time legendary stuff. Never thought I would see on screen. So many great things. It's so hard to rate because I love so many aspects of the visual language in the show and just what it's done for live action Star Wars storytelling and its potential for future live action Star Wars storytelling. The fact that anything's on the table now really was cemented in this show. We thought it was possible that we see things after the Mandalorian season 2 finale. This cemented that anything is on the table. Anything and everything from books, comics, TV, video games, everything is on the table. I love that, but unfortunately, didn't love much like the structure and the storytelling overall. I'm gonna give it 3 out of 5. I think that's where I'm at right now. Obviously, I've watched every episode at least twice, some of them 3 or 4 times. I'll probably watch the whole season as a whole eventually again. That's where I'm sitting right now, 3 out of 5. That's fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, by the way, in case you're wondering. So yeah, there we go. So that is the Book of Boba Fett Season 1, Chapter 7 review. Thank you all so much for watching. If you haven't yet, please hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel for Star Wars content minimum 3 days a week. And comment below, let us know what you thought of the Book of Boba Fett Chapter 7 and Season 1 of the Book of Boba Fett as a whole. And if you haven't yet, follow us on social media at Star Wars Lads on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And then if you listen to the podcast version, or if you're listening to the podcast version right now, we are on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or many other podcast platforms of your choice. Check us out on podcast platforms. We usually post 1 episode a week on podcast platforms. So thank you all so much for watching and for following along with us during the entire reign of the Book of Boba Fett on Disney+. We will be talking Friday on the possibilities of Season 2, so you're going to want to check that video out. It will be in place of predictions and speculation, but we will give some predictions and speculation if a Season 2 were to be greenlit. So that is going to be it for the review section of our Book of Boba Fett series. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.